I couldn't believe it when the bartender told me who you are.
Why are you talking to me, man?
Your father was captain of a starship for 12 minutes. He saved 800 lives, including yours. I dare you to do better. Enlist in Starfleet.
You will experience fear.
Fear in the face of certain death.
Pull your chute!
We received a distress call.
I've been waiting for this day my whole life. This day of reckoning.
We've got no captain and no first officer to replace him.
Yeah, we do.
You are capable of deciding your own destiny. The question is, which path will you choose?
James T. Kirk was a great man, but that was another life.
Airlocking torpedoes. Emergency evasive.
Fire everything!
The Rewatch Podcast presents the Star Trek film series Rewatch. Join us each week as we head into the final frontier aboard the Starship Enterprise. Send your thoughts to the Rewatch Podcast at gmail.com. Join us at our Facebook page, facebook.com/rewatchpodcast, and follow us on Twitter at rewatchpod.
Today we're discussing Star Trek, starring Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Bruce Greenwood, Carl Urban, Zoe Saldana, Simon Pegg, John Cho, Anton Yelchin, Chris Hemsworth, Winona Ryder, Eric Bana, and Leonard Nimoy, directed by J.J. Abrams. Welcome back to the Star Trek film series Rewatch. I'm Cory, Ensign Authorization Code 95-Victor-2.
And this is Nathan. And I told you people, I don't need a doctor, damn it. I am a doctor.
How you doing, Nathan?
Hey, Cory, I just got to say, last week when we were discussing Nemesis and you went through the thing, you kind of stopped at Stuart Baird and you kind of went, Stuart Baird? As if you were surprised to hear him. I'm surprised you didn't say Winona Ryder. I'm disappointed you didn't do that.
That is true. Every time I watch this movie, I'm like, seriously? Winona Ryder?
Yeah. It's just, Winona Ryder is Spock's mother.
In some old age makeup, but we'll get into that.
We will get into that.
What's your history with the 2009 reboot Star Trek?
My history with this film is a bit of a troubled history. It came out in 2009. I remember anticipating it 7 years since the last film, 2002 in Nemesis, and obviously Enterprise, the TV show, I think it got up to season 4 and was cancelled. So this film was reasonably anticipated. However, there was a lot of trepidation from myself. And I remember watching it, and I won't give the game away too much. I'd rather kind of discuss it when we actually get to the main film discussion. But let's just say that I've got some very strong opinions regarding this film. What about you, mate?
So this movie came at like a pivotal point in my, let's say, film life. You know, I'd always wanted to work in the film industry. And at this point, I had started working as an usher at the cinema, kind of like a dream job kind of thing, working at the movies, something I'd always wanted to do. So I changed careers, and it's 2009, and Star Trek comes out, and I had the most fun working at the cinema while this movie was out. I mean, I met so many great people coming in to check out Star Trek, the big reboot, and to see all the enthusiasm that people were displaying when they were coming in to watch this movie. It was a really good experience.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of very passionate people regarding Star Trek. And as I said, there was a 7-year gap and the TV show was kind of cancelled. So there was a lot of hunger, for use of a better term, for more Star Trek. And that they went down a very interesting path.
And, at that point when it came out, I hadn't even seen a Star Trek movie before or an episode.
Really?
Yeah. Like, this was like what made me go back and check out that original series, and later TNG, along with all the other movies.
So back when you were younger, what was your opinion of Star Trek? Did it just pass you by? You just never really paid that much attention to it?
Yeah, I really gotten into Sliders, of course. We're doing the rewatch over on the other show I do with Tom. So that was a big show in my life. Doctor Who as well. Star Trek, I just never gotten around to it.
Fair enough. It is, for people that aren't into it, it can be a bit overwhelming, isn't it? There's a lot of Star Trek.
Yes. So I'm getting there. Anyway, okay, so shall we get into a synopsis? And I was thinking, for something a bit different, how about you take the synopsis this time?
I'm excited. I've never done a synopsis before, so let's do it.
Go for it.
All right. When the Romulan mining ship Narada attacks the Federation starship USS Kelvin, Lieutenant George Kirk substitutes his captain, who's going to meet the Romulan Captain Nero in his vessel to negotiate a ceasefire in the command of the Kelvin. He orders the evacuation of the damaged starship, including his wife, who is in labour, while delivering their son, James Tiberius Kirk, in the hospital shuttlecraft. George Kirk crashes the Kelvin against the Narada. The reckless and troubled Kirk grows up, and when he meets Captain Christopher Pike in a bar fight, of all things, he's invited to join Starfleet. Meanwhile, in Vulcan, the outcast Spock grows up discriminated against for his half-human condition. They meet each other in Starfleet Academy, wherein Spock accuses Kirk of lack of ethics and cheating a test of command. The trial is suspended with the information that Vulcan is under attack, sending Federation starships to Vulcan, including the recently commissioned USS Enterprise. Kirk, who is a stowaway, foresees an alien attack and advises Captain Pike. However, the Enterprise is damaged, and when Captain Pike travels to meet Captain Nero, Spock has command and a serious friction with Kirk after the destruction of Vulcan. Kirk is accused of mutiny and stranded on the desert planet Delta Vega. Out of the blue, he is saved from an attack of an alien animal by an old Spock, who explains to Kirk that Captain Nero blames Spock and the Federation for the destruction of his home planet Romulus by a supernova. Spock explains that he had failed in the creation of a black hole with red matter to consume the supernova, and Nero is seeking revenge. Now, Kirk has to find a way to save Earth, the next destination of the Narada.
Very ominous indeed.
Wow, man, I've got sympathy for you. For the last 10 weeks, you've been reading those synopsises.
Yes. Well, we are recording this one quite late at night, and I've been at work all day.
Yeah.
So I was happy to let you take this one.
Nice. Nice one. Anyway, shall we get into a little bit of trivia regarding this film?
Absolutely. So we here in Australia actually got this movie released a whole month before it was released in the United States.
I don't think it was released here. I think it was premiered. I think they waited until the release date, like a month later, but for some reason, they had a screening at the Opera House in Sydney on April 7th, 2009, and it was released in the States on May 8th. Truthfully, I don't have the figures in front of me right now if it was released locally on April 7th and screened everywhere. I'm fairly certain it wasn't. I think it was a one-off special screening at the Opera House.
And I do recall this being like that mid-year kind of release, when it did come out. So still interesting that they did do such an early screening here in Australia as opposed to the States. Kind of like what they did with the first Avengers movie. Like we got that like 2 weeks before it was released in the States.
I think you're right, actually.
It happens every now and again where they'll just release something here like way early. It's nice.
Yeah, I know. But this film was a big hit. I mean, to be fair, the budget was quite large for a Star Trek film. Certainly the biggest budget that we've kind of come across. It was $150 million, and you can see where every dollar was spent when you're actually watching this film. This is a very nice looking film. Like there are visual effects absolutely everywhere. The set design, there's no money spared at all, and you can definitely feel the effects of the budget on this film.
Oh, without a doubt. And of course, getting J.J. Abrams was definitely a good call.
Yeah. Well, I mean, J.J. Abrams was fresh off Mission Impossible 3, wasn't he? Which I believe was his first directorial, feature film directorial effort. Like, I know that he's directed episodes of Lost and various kind of other TV shows, but I don't think he did a movie prior to MI3.
Yeah, he was known for his TV work like Alias and Felicity and whatnot. I guess Cloverfield was in there. He produced Cloverfield.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at J.J. Abrams' filmography and his TV series production credits, like it's pretty amazing the level of shows that he's and like how popular they were. Like, wasn't he behind Alias as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly right. So I think this movie sort of brought him to the forefront of like big franchise, epic action, sci-fi kind of stuff, and really let him display his style as were. A lot of his films would follow the style of what he does with Star Trek here.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And this, like, it's so glossy and over the top. Yeah. As I said, though, I'm looking forward to getting into our main film discussion regarding this one.
Yeah, but, a little bit of extra trivia here. This was Academy nominated.
Yep.
That's showing you exactly how many levels this has gone up since the last movie. This was considered for Academy Awards and actually won Best Makeup.
Yeah, making it the first Star Trek film of the whole series to actually win an Academy Award, which is a big deal.
Exactly right. So, nothing to snub your nose at.
And also, like, when I actually think about it, like, I literally finished watching this movie an hour ago. And, you're right. Like, from a makeup perspective, it was a good-looking film. And this film went on to gross $385 million worldwide. It actually made $257 million in the United States alone. So a big hit. I would imagine Paramount and whatnot made a lot of money off this one.
Yeah. And I love this little bit of trivia too. In the United States, when it started to screening started at 7 p.m. on May the 7th. And in that opening day, it grossed $4 million.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty crazy, isn't it?
From just one day of screening. So it shows you the anticipation. Like, it was there, and Paramount knew it was there. They just needed to figure out how to display it again, make it fresh.
Yeah, I know. Simon Pegg actually didn't audition for the part of Scotty. He actually simply received an email from J.J. Abrams asking if he'd like to play Scotty. Pegg said that he would have done it for free or even paid Abrams to be in the movie if he wasn't offered the part. So, I mean, if you're kind of into like kind of pop culture and whatnot, we all know that Simon Pegg is totally a sci-fi geek, just like all of us,
Yeah.
So it's not a surprise that he was like clamoring to get involved with a new Star Trek film.
Yeah, and even if he wasn't paid to do this movie, it wouldn't matter. It would have been great for his career. He could have worked for scale for a win.
Now, this is something that I found interesting, is that in an interview that Abrams did, he actually said that he had never seen Star Trek Nemesis because he felt that the franchise had disconnected from the original series. For him, he said Star Trek was all about Kirk and Spock, and the other series were like separate space adventures simply with the name Star Trek attached.
Yeah, and I actually find that quite interesting. I wonder if he even knew that the Romulans were involved in Star Trek Nemesis, because, as much as it is that they've gone to the effort of trying to reinvent Star Trek for this movie, it would have been a big gamble to go back to Romulans again after Nemesis.
Yeah, I actually find it a little bit insulting in some regards, that Abrams didn't really pay much respect to the previous Star Trek films. As I said, we'll get more into it in our main film discussion, but the fact that he didn't really just even kind of go there says a lot to me about how passionate he is about Star Trek.
You can't feel too bad about not watching Nemesis. Ultimately, the TNG movies don't have a lot to do with the original series. So
no, they don't.
In research, what would it matter?
Now, as we discussed in our synopsis before, and again, this is not really giving a spoiler away, but Spock, as in older Spock, Leonard Nimoy, is actually in this film. And they were so desperate to get him involved in the production that had Nimoy actually disliked the script, production would have been delayed for it to be rewritten. Nimoy actually later said that this is the first and only time I ever had a filmmaker say, "We cannot make this film without you, and we won't make it without you."
Very interesting. I think it's a good call, really. Paying respect.
Yeah, from that perspective, it kind of confuses the hell out of me from, are they paying respect to everything or just Spock,
Because, it's not like he asked Chapman to come back or anything.
We didn't ask anyone else to come back. It's just old Spock, and that's it.
Yeah, we just want Nimoy.
And yeah, we just want Nimoy. He's the most important part of it all.
And I love this little bit of trivia. This was in the audio commentary. J.J. Abrams said he had a meeting with George Lucas, and he asked Lucas how he would make the movie better, to which Lucas stated that he would add lightsabers.
Yeah, I know.
Too funny.
Oh my God, it would have been, can you imagine a George Lucas version of Star Trek? It would just be odd. To be honest with you, we're actually experiencing this literally as we speak. Obviously with J.J. Abrams being Star Trek 2009 and Star Trek Into Darkness, that was from 2013, I think it was. And now, obviously, as we all know, he's gone on to Star Wars, The Force Awakens. So it's interesting that they've kind of gone down that path to have the same filmmaker so attached to Star Trek go into Star Wars, because for so long they were always kind of seen as, almost rival entities. Although I would argue that is perhaps not true. I think there's space for both. I can love Star Trek and Star Wars. I don't think there was ever a rivalry in my mind. I like both of them, So I did find that interesting.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's one of those things that people just bring up all the time. And it's like, are you a Star Trek fan or a Star Wars fan? Why can't I just be both,
Yeah, totally.
Do you like Elvis or the Beatles? Hey, maybe I like both of them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This was actually the feature film debut of Thor, or should I say Chris Hemsworth?
Yes.
Playing another iconic character, which is James Tiberius Kirk's dad, George Kirk.
I think he does a pretty good job.
Yeah, I don't recall George Kirk ever being mentioned. Maybe he was, in the original TV show. I wouldn't call myself... I love the movies, but I'm not an expert on the original TV show. I've seen most of the episodes, but I certainly haven't seen all of them.
Going on to, other people for cameos, it was on the books to have Nichelle Nichols back, apart from Leonard Nimoy, but of course she never ended up doing it. But she was going to play Uhura's grandmother in the movie at some point, but if you got Leonard Nimoy playing Spock again, I don't know if it would be kind of insulting to have Nichelle Nichols come back to play a different character.
I think it would have been strange, truthfully.
Yeah.
It would have been a little too distracting. In some ways, I find it quite distracting having Leonard Nimoy there. I like him being there, but it's still a bit distracting. But yeah, having Uhura there would have been odd.
Yeah.
Yep.
And getting into Leonard Nimoy a bit more as well. This is the first time he appeared in a live action film role since Star Trek 6. He retired. Abrams had to go and talk him into coming to do it, come out of retirement and do this.
Yeah, it's pretty brave of him, isn't it? I actually didn't realise he was so out of the loop. When he says he's retired, he's really retired. Retired in the same way that Sean Connery is retired. Sean Connery's last film role was The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. That was forever ago. He hasn't passed away. He's still there. He could still act if he wanted to. He just hasn't done it.
And of course, JJ had a great working relationship with Nimoy before he died.
Yeah.
Because he actually managed after this movie to talk him into going into a very small yet reoccurring character on the TV show Fringe, which he produced.
I remember you said that.
Yeah,
Because you're a fan, aren't you? You really
man,
like that show.
Yeah, so it's the mark of a great director who can talk somebody into coming out of retirement to do the work for him. So, yeah.
Apparently, Adrian Brody had discussed playing Spock with J.J. Abrams. That would have been strange, I think. In saying that, though, probably would have worked if he was in the makeup and the gear and the costume and the haircut. You probably would have bought it.
I don't know. Adrian Brody, he's an all right actor. I think Zachary Quinto brings something more to it.
I think the casting of this film is pretty good, truthfully.
Yeah. Because also we have here that Chris Pratt had read for Captain Kirk. This is not Chris Pratt as we know him today. This is Parks and Rec Chris Pratt.
Yeah. That's the shoe shiner. That's right.
I think he would have hammed it up a bit more, whereas Chris Pine kind of has his own thing going.
Another one that could have been in there, Gary Sinise, bears a strong resemblance to DeForest Kelley, was actually rumoured to have been in consideration to portray Bones. Again, happy they didn't go that way, because I think Carl Urban does an amazing job as Bones.
Yeah, and no offense to Gary Sinise, he's a great actor. I think he might have been a bit too old. You're going for this prequel thing. You want to get those younger people in there, and unfortunately, Gary Sinise is getting on in years. He's not like an old man or anything, but he's definitely older than everybody else in the cast.
Oh, definitely. I think that kind of wraps up our trivia, don't you think?
Yes.
So, how about we get into our main film discussion?
From the get-go, like I was saying, this is obviously a very, very, very different take on Star Trek. Like, this looks and feels like something completely different to anything we've seen before.
I can't work out if it's a reboot, a reimagining, or a continuation, or what in terms of Star Trek. I'm leaning towards reboot because they throw a lot of the timeline just out the window.
I'm going with the word re-prequel.
Re-prequel.
A reboot prequel, because I think by the end of it they've brought in so many themes of time travel, and the characters even call out ultimate timeline, and throughout Star Trek I think that's been such a key thing, but it's always been about restoring the timeline to what it's supposed to be. Whereas here, the timeline has changed, but you know what? We're going to stay in this timeline, and we're going to tell new stories from this alternate version of what's going on. So, it's not messing with old Star Trek at all. It's kind of just reimagining it in a new way.
I'm not too sure if it's a better way, though, truthfully. I like aspects of it. Chris Pine as James T. Kirk, like the way William Shatner portrayed Kirk, is that you always kind of... He was a bit of a prat, and you kind of knew he was with the way he kind of presented himself and the arrogance that he had. But Shatner played him with such kind of charm, and you kind of liked him, and you kind of rooted for him a little bit. You didn't want to see him lose, where Chris Pine's take on James T. Kirk is a lot more aggressive. And he's actually, I find it more arrogant than Shatner ever played the character. And I really didn't want to see him win.
I can see where you're going. But I guess we are getting a little bit too far ahead there, because the movie does start on the USS Kelvin. For people who don't know, Kelvin is kind of a thing that Abrams does. He drops the name Kelvin into everything he makes.
Does he really?
He really does. It shows up all the time. If you pay close enough attention, you'll find the name Kelvin in every J.J. Abrams work. And that is actually an homage he does to his grandfather, who was named Kelvin.
Oh, that's interesting.
So here it's the USS Kelvin, and they encounter this lightning storm in space.
Yes, and a Romulan ship, the Narada, actually emerges from the storm and attacks the Kelvin. The Narada actually demands that the Kelvin's captain, Rabawu, come aboard to actually negotiate a truce. And once aboard, Rabawu is questioned about the current stardate and Ambassador Spock, who he professes not to know. Narada's commander, Nero, actually kills him and continues his attack on the Kelvin. George Kirk, the Kelvin's first officer, orders the ship's personnel, including his pregnant wife Winona, who looked awfully like someone that used to be on the TV show House.
It's the same actress.
Am I thinking the same with the right woman?
Yes, you are. Yes, definitely her.
Nice.
I don't know her name, but it's definitely her.
Yeah, I think I read in the credits it was Jennifer Morrison. I think that's her name.
Okay.
Anyway, including his pregnant wife Winona to evacuate the ship whilst he pilots the Kelvin on a collision course with the Narada as the autopilot function has been damaged. At the cost of his life, Kirk ensures Winona's survival as she gives birth to James T. Kirk. And let me just say, as it's all happening, like, she's literally giving birth in the shuttlecraft as the Kelvin is being crashed into the Romulan ship.
Well, you know what? I really like this opening. I really do. And it's like I said, it is setting up a brand new tone for Star Trek. You know, they're going in a different direction this time. And it's, you know, it's a lot more action, you know, which of course is something that Gene Roddenberry didn't really want. He was all about the science when it came to Star Trek. But, you know, they're rebooting it. They're going a different direction. So I kind of like this action that they get into, especially with the captain heading over to the Narada, and you know Nero just doesn't want to talk to him. He doesn't say a word in this whole opening. He just sits back in his chair and lets his second in command do all the talking, who is played greatly by Clifton Collins Jr. I don't know if you're familiar with that actor.
I'm so glad you said that because I actually thought he was a pretty good part of this film. He's an actor that I recognise. I was like, man, I know who you are, but I couldn't pick what film it was from.
Man, I saw him in this great movie based on a Bret Easton Ellis novel called Rules of Attraction, where he played a drug dealer opposite James Van Der Beek.
Yeah, Dawson. Yep.
Yeah, bloody great movie, and probably the best role you'll ever see James Van Der Beek in, by the way. But yeah, you know, so I like that guy, and you know, as much as I think Eric Bana does a great job as Nero, you know, his second in command, Clifton Collins Jr., he really comes to play in this movie and does a fantastic job. But, you know, the whole thing with Kirk's dad, you know, the reveal of it being George Kirk and the fact that his wife is giving birth to James, they have that great moment where they talk about what they're going to name him.
Yep.
I thought it was very clever. They say, let's name him after your father. No, Tiberius. No, this is the worst. Let's name him after your father. And then, of course, we know his name is James Tiberius Kirk. So
yeah, let's call him Jim. That's right. Let's call him Jim.
So yeah, I thought it was a great opening. You know, setting that new tone. I love it.
Yeah, there was a lot of weight at the opening, and the stakes were high, weren't they? He needed to kind of get off but you knew he wasn't going to, weren't you? It was very, very dramatic.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Just quickly, when I was watching the start of this film, I totally forgot about J.J. Abrams' love of the lens flare.
Yes. His calling card.
They're everywhere. They're absolutely, it's crazy. It's out of control, his obsession with them. I think he's chilled out a little bit in the next Star Trek film on the lens flare, but this film in particular, man, he really overdoes it.
It's an interesting idea, and it is a very Abrams thing, you know, like I said, it's become his calling card. I don't know, it almost gives it a gritty realism that they haven't taken the time to, you know, make sure that you're not shining lights down the lens or anything like that. It like almost like a documentary feel.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
So Winona survives from the crashing of the Kelvin, and she gives birth to James T. Kirk. We actually flash forward, I believe it is 17 years in 2250 on the planet Vulcan, and a young Spock is actually accepted to join the Vulcan Science Academy after we see him being bullied by some older kind of Vulcans. And it's kind of interesting to see from our perspective, because it's something that I don't recall seeing in the Star Trek universe before, is the idea of Vulcans and being bullied by older kids and how people who are so logical kind of cope with this thing. So they go to great lengths to display Spock's human side, don't they?
You have surpassed the expectations of your instructors. Your final record is flawless. With one exception, I see that you have applied to Starfleet as well.
It was logical to cultivate multiple options.
Logical, but unnecessary. You're hereby accepted to the Vulcan Science Academy. It is truly remarkable, Spock, that you have achieved so much, despite your disadvantage. All rise!
If you would clarify, Minister, to what disadvantage are you referring?
Your human mother.
Council. Ministers, I must decline.
No Vulcan has ever declined admission to this academy.
Then as I am half human, your record remains untarnished.
Spock,
You have made a commitment to honor the Vulcan way.
Why did you come before this council today? Was it to satisfy your emotional need to rebel?
The only emotion I wish to convey is gratitude. Thank you, ministers, for your consideration.
And it is setting up that this movie is going to be very centered on both Kirk and Spock. Like, these are our main characters. And then, of course, you know, the rest of the cast are going to be introduced as the movie goes along. But he's got it right. You know, our central characters are Kirk and Spock, and that's the way it should be. So they're the ones we're going to get the early childhood flashbacks to. And then, yeah, immediately we're just going to cut to the time when they are both headed for Starfleet.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So they're both headed for Starfleet. In fact, I think before we kind of get to that, Kirk gets into a bit of a bar fight.
Yes, very randomly at some random Iowa bar.
Well, and doesn't he meet Uhura in the bar as well?
Yes.
And he starts kind of chatting her up, and then this big lug kind of intervenes, and doesn't he call her? He calls the big lug Cupcake, doesn't he? He goes, hey there, Cupcake, you know, like, give me a break. And they get into a big fight, and he gets the living daylights, you know, hit out of him. And then it's actually interrupted by the Captain Christopher Pike, who in Star Trek folklore was the original captain of the Enterprise in the pilot episode. That was the very first episode that was filmed back in 1966, I think it was. And for whatever reason, that pilot didn't work out, and they actually ordered a second pilot, which is the beloved crew that we now know. I think Christopher Pike did show up in a later episode, not the same actor, but the same character. So they decided to kind of go down that path and actually reimagine that character to be like a commander of some description that is in control. And so, yeah, he kind of breaks up the fight in this bar, and he kind of encourages Kirk to join Starfleet, and your aptitude's out of control. You're obviously a smart guy. You should use it for good rather than kind of just wasting your life in a bar. And he encourages him along like the true and correct path.
And he takes like a day to think it over, decides that, yeah, he's going to go ahead and do it. He actually even challenges Pike and says, you know, it's supposed to be 4 years. Watch me do it in 3. And as they head off to Starfleet Academy on the shuttle ride over there.
Yeah, that's right.
Is where he meets McCoy.
I know.
And they have a great moment too. And they sort of just slip in the origins of the nickname Bones, because he says that he's just gone through a divorce, and his wife took the whole planet in the divorce.
Yeah, that's right.
And all he has left is his bones. So.
Yeah, I thought it was a nice touch. And I think out of all the new casting in this film, I think they really got Bones spot on. Carl Urban clearly did his homework on DeForest Kelley, watched a lot of episodes and got his mannerisms down and the way he talks and his dialect. It was really spot on. And I think they did a great homage to DeForest Kelley and the character of Bones on that one.
Yeah, 100% agree. And then, you know, again, we're going to just cut forward a bit. We're going to just skip over all the nonsense stuff that we don't need to see. And we're going to get into Kirk taking the Kobayashi Maru test, another bring back from the original series that, you know, they talked about how he cheated on the Kobayashi Maru test. So we're actually going to see him do that and reprogram the test so it is no longer a no-win situation.
It's a little anticlimactic. I found the whole Kobayashi Maru test, because I really felt like we've seen it all before. But again, I'm watching this movie from the perspective of someone who truly loves Star Trek. Like, I really love Next Generation and DS9 and Voyager, and I'm even warming to Enterprise, and like, I like all the movies and I'm right into it and I love it. So the timeline and the history of all the characters is actually quite important to me when I'm actually watching these movies. So to see J.J. Abrams try to do an homage to it, but not necessarily pull it off as well as I would have liked. Because as I said, man, I kind of felt like I'd seen it all before. I knew what was going to happen. But I suppose I think this movie is designed for people that aren't as familiar with Star Trek as perhaps I am.
Yeah, and unlike, you know, a lot of the Star Trek films, you know, we've said that a whole bunch of them require that you see the series before watching the film, or else you're not going to get a lot of these lines that they throw in, these little tangents that they go on. This one, you can still enjoy it without having seen any Star Trek.
Oh, definitely.
They explain it well enough that, you don't need any foreknowledge.
Yeah, well, and let's be honest, man, that's probably why this film did so well. I mean, it made $350 million worldwide, considerably more than any other Star Trek film that I'm kind of aware of. Like, now, I realised you can kind of, I think like the original, the early films like Wrath of Khan and Motion Picture, like if you actually do the money conversion, it's probably not too far away. But this film, like it made a lot of money and was quite successful.
Continuing on, we get this like disciplinary hearing for Kirk. He's trying to justify why he quote unquote cheated on the Kobayashi Maru test, and suddenly they need all recruits to head into battle stations because Vulcan is under attack.
Yes. What did you think of the Kirk characterization? Like, thinking about how William Shatner and whatnot. Did you feel Chris Pine did a good enough job, or did you find him to be a bit irritating and kind of a little bit more arrogant than you would have liked?
I liked that he did something different with it, because unlike Spock or Bones, where you can sort of do a really good characterization and homage, if you will, that both Zachary Quinto and Carl Urban do, I think it would have been cheesy for Chris Pine to try and do a Shatner impression.
Yeah, no, you're right. It would have been a bit odd.
Yeah. So I kind of like that he sort of did his own thing. I didn't mind it. Sure, he's arrogant, but, Kirk was always arrogant.
Was he really, though? Was he really that arrogant, though? Like Chris Pine comes across as very rude and disrespectful in this film to almost any kind of sign of authority. And I know Kirk had his moments when he kind of went against orders and disobeyed command and went down his own path. I know he did all that, but I don't remember him being really rude and disrespectful in the same way that Chris Pine is in this film.
I don't know. It is a different characterization, but honestly, I don't mind it.
Is it though? Because they've got Spock in there, so it's clearly not meant to be a different characterization. Because even when he meets Spock at the end of the film, he kind of goes, "Oh, James T. Kirk, it's so good to see you, old friend." He clearly knows who he is. So I'm not convinced it's meant to be this completely alternate timeline and reboot. They're meant to be the same characters that we've been watching for 10 films. I just kind of felt like all that was thrown out the door. It's the Terminator Genesis of the Star Trek series.
I don't know. I guess we'd have to agree to disagree, because I don't mind it.
Fair enough.
Kirk manages to weasel his way on board the Enterprise with the help of Bones, because Bones gives him a inoculation against something, so he would present symptoms, and therefore he can say, "Look, I need to bring him on board so he can get treatment." And I kind of like that aspect of it, and then how it'll have him be unable to communicate too clearly when he realizes that he knows what's going on.
Jim! What's going on? Jim, come back!
Captain!
Jim,
Captain
come back!
Pike, sir, we have to stop the ship.
Kirk, how the hell did you get on board the Enterprise?
Captain, this man's under the influence of a severe reaction to a vaccine. He's completely delusional.
Vulcan is not experiencing a natural disaster. It's being attacked by Romulans.
Romulans. Cadet Kirk, I think you've had enough attention for one day. McCoy, take him back to medical. We'll have words later.
Aye, Captain.
Sir, that same anomaly.
Kirk,
Mr. Kirk is not clear to be aboard this
vessel.
vessel.
Look, I get it. You're
by
a great
regulations,
I'd love to do it again with you,
too.
too.
I can remove the cadet.
Try it! This
Kirk.
cadet is trying to save the bridge.
By recommending a full stop mid-warp during a rescue mission.
It's not a rescue mission. Listen to me. It's an attack.
Based on what facts?
That same anomaly, a lightning storm in space that we saw today, also occurred on the day of my birth, before a Romulan ship attacked the USS Kelvin. You know that, sir. I read your dissertation. That ship, which had formidable and advanced weaponry, was never seen or heard from again. The Kelvin attack took place on the edge of Klingon space, and at 2300 hours last night, there was an attack. 47 Klingon warbirds destroyed by Romulans, sir, and it was reported that the Romulans were in one ship, one massive ship.
And you know of this Klingon attack. How?
Sir, I intercepted and translated the message myself. Kirk's report is accurate.
We're warping into a trap, sir. The Romulans waiting for us. I promise you that.
The cadet's logic is sound.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you're right. And because he kind of wheels on board. I can't remember what kind of thing he gives him, because doesn't his like hands inflate and stuff, and they get really fat, and he kind of like, what's going on? And then he kind of weasels his way onto the bridge, and Commander Pike is there, and he tries to throw him off, doesn't he?
And I think this is where it gets a little strange in the storyline. I have to start suspending disbelief, because he approaches Pike with the information that he has about, how a similar anomaly had occurred on the day his father died. We're still not getting all the information we need in regards to what that's all about, because all we saw was that another small ship came through it.
Yeah, that's it.
And was captured by Nero.
Yeah.
And now suddenly they are just drilling a hole down into Vulcan.
Yeah, that's right.
So, it is a very slow burn on the reveal of what's actually happening here.
Yeah, and it's a little bit confusing about precisely kind of what is going on. Nero is totally driven by severe amounts of revenge and you must feel what I feel kind of anger, if you know what I mean. That's his whole driving force. I mean, he's convinced that the Vulcans are responsible for the destruction of Romulus on his timeline, and he's totally driven to make sure that the Vulcans feel exactly the same pain by inflicting this terrible kind of thing on them, and they don't really explain the whole red liquid that they've kind of got, do they?
They just call it red matter or something like that. It creates black holes.
Yeah, that's right. So
the main disconnect for me is that Kirk, explains all this stuff to Pike, and Pike just says, well, we're going to go and have to destroy this drill, so Kirk, you come with me because you're not supposed to be here, and oh, by the way, I'm going to make you my first officer.
Yeah, that's right.
What?
I know. As opposed to
2 minutes ago, he was academic suspension, and now he's first officer, and he's going on this mission to disable the drill. Okay.
What did you think of Anton Yelchin as Chekhov? I thought he was pretty good.
Yeah. Again, it's another character that you can do a pretty good homage in the characterization.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. Also, too, one part of the story that I did have a bit of an issue with, and again, this is me just being nitpicky. I realise I'm being nitpicky, but it's tough for me to watch, man. I hated the Uhura Spock romance kind of storyline that they had going on. I totally didn't buy it at all. I thought it was odd and strange, and it really kind of it just didn't feel like something that could or would happen.
And I think that's going to get worse for the next movie, but we'll hold on to that until we talk about that.
Yeah, that's all right. It's all good. We'll kind of get there. So they show up at the Vulcan thing, and it's all being attacked, and they send Sulu and Kirk and
a red shirt.
And a random red shirt down to kind of dismantle the drill. It's actually a pretty good sequence, actually.
Yeah, it's not bad, and I did think it was funny that the guy who dies straight up is wearing red. It's obvious what he's doing there.
Yes.
And he immediately dies because he refuses to open his chute, like he's some sort of adrenaline junkie, and he just gets flung down underneath the drill.
Yeah, immediately dead, and doesn't kind of Chekhov go, someone's died, or something. Yeah, we've lost Carter, or whatever his name was.
Nobody cares what his name is. He's dead.
I quite like that picture you posted online the other day where it was like Kirk pointing at something, and he's like, dig 3 graves up there. There's going to be some deaths not too far away, or something like that. It made me laugh.
Yeah, and Sulu gets a pretty awesome sword fight in, because he apparently did fencing at some point during his time at Starfleet. And
is this before or after he has time to start a family?
It's probably around the same time, I guess. I don't know.
Probably around the same time, I would expect.
Yeah, but John Cho, he's a good choice for Sulu.
I thought he was pretty good, actually. I quite like John Cho. Harold from Harold and Kumar.
I do remember seeing a thing at the time that he actually felt it was more appropriate to speak to George Takei about the fact that he is Chinese, not Japanese. And that, he wanted to make sure that George Takei was happy with the characterization maybe changing slightly. I guess there's not a lot of Japanese big stars who are Japanese in Hollywood, and John Cho was kind of, an up-and-comer
Yep.
In terms of his career, so he kind of felt like, yes, we're both Asian, but the character is supposed to be Japanese.
In this film, all of the casting are name actors. There's no B-grade random actors you've never heard of. I mean, even Anton Yelchin had kind of done one or two things before, and like Zachary Quinto we knew from Heroes, John Cho from the Harold and Kumar movies, plus various other things. Simon Pegg was a big star. Carl Urban was from Lord of the Rings, and Zoe Saldana was from Avatar before. So they kind of went out of their way to cast some very well-known actors in these pivotal roles.
So, and again, another good fight sequence, Kirk and Sulu fight off these Romulans on the drill, and unfortunately they are too late to shut it down, and the red matter is thrown down into the big cavern that they've drilled, and believe it or not, they destroy Vulcan.
I know, it's pretty intense, isn't it?
Very, very bold indeed, And it's like I was saying, I really wish that a lot of the time in those previous films that they would take risks. It's like we're saying in Insurrection when they wanted to kill Data off. Like, do it. Yeah, go ahead and do it. Take the risk.
Yep.
Throw it out there. So he is really going to change up the timeline, and he is just going to have Vulcan destroyed.
Yeah, which is pretty full on if you think about it. And like I think Spock says that there were 6 billion people on Vulcan at that particular time, and most of them are all dead now thanks to the actions of Captain Nero.
You must have a lot of questions for me. I only have one for you. I need the subspace frequencies of Starfleet's border protection grids, specifically those surrounding Earth. Christopher, answer my question.
No, you answer for the genocide you just committed against a peaceful planet.
I prevented genocide. In my time, where I come from, this is a simple mining vessel. I chose a life of honest labor. Provide for myself and the wife who was expecting my child. I was off-planet, doing my job while your Federation did nothing, and allowed my people to burn while our planet broke in half. And Spock, he didn't help us. He betrayed us.
No, you're confused. You've been misinformed. Romulus hasn't been destroyed. It's out there right now. You're blaming the Federation for something that hasn't happened.
It has happened! I watched it happen! I saw it happen! Don't tell me it didn't happen! And when I lost her, I promised myself retribution. And for 25 years, I planned my revenge against the Federation and forgot what it was like to live a normal life. I did not forget the pain. It's a pain that every surviving Vulcan now shares. My purpose, Christopher, is to not simply avoid the destruction of the home that I love, but to create a Romulus that exists, free of the Federation. They say only then will she be truly saved.
Yeah, he says that he surmises only about 10,000 Vulcans are left. He refers to himself as being part of an endangered species. So, very interesting way to go, and I'm sure that's going to come up as the series progresses.
Yeah. So somehow Kirk finds himself on the planet that Spock has been stranded on, Delta Vega, and he was actually put there by Nero so he can watch Vulcan's destruction as revenge for failing to save Romulus.
And we should clarify at this point, this is old Spock. This is Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah, this is Leonard Nimoy kind of traveling through time, through black holes, and Nero waiting 25 years for revenge. That Spock.
Yes, and he, in a great montage of mind melding, unveils the whole plan to Kirk.
Yep.
And it pretty much is that a star had gone supernova. Romulus was going to be sucked up in this thing, so they were going to throw the red matter at it to have it all sucked down so it wouldn't destroy Romulus. Spock got there too late. He opened the black hole, and both Nero and his ships were sucked into it, but Nero came out first, and then Spock came out second, but 25 years later, because of how black holes work. So that's pretty much, and that's pretty much the nuts and bolts.
But in Spock's mind, it was just like a matter of minutes or seconds.
Yeah, exactly. So he went in first, Spock went in just a couple of minutes later, but when he came out, it was 25 years apart.
Yeah, that's right. So Nero was kind of like filled with anger and vengeance and just wanted destruction, and pretty crazy bad guy, truthfully.
Yeah, and this is where Kirk and old Spock head off to meet with Scotty.
Yeah, I was a bit confused as to why Scotty was down there.
He says this whole thing about how he was testing new equations for beaming people from one planet to another, and, you know, just across great distances. And at some point he had tested it on the dog of like a chancellor or something of the...
And he got in trouble, didn't he?
Yeah, he lost the dog at some point during the process and was, I guess, punished by being sent out to Delta Vega to man this outpost.
I didn't mind Simon Pegg's realization of Montgomery Scott. I think he did okay with it.
Yeah, and then they bring in more of this like time travel-y stuff with Spock sort of revealing that he has all these equations that Scotty himself had invented. You know, just as we had seen in, was it The Voyage Home, when Scotty was giving out equations for the transparent aluminum.
Transparent aluminum, yeah, that's right.
That out willy-nilly to anybody.
That's in the classic computer scene.
So, you know, again, you know, I thought that was like an interesting montage. They're just like, well, the reason you haven't heard of the equations is because you haven't discovered it yet.
Yes, exactly. So Kirk and Scott beam onto the Enterprise. Following the elder Spock's advice, Kirk provokes younger Spock into attacking him, forcing Spock to recognize that he's emotionally compromised and he will relinquish command to Kirk. After talking with Sarek, Spock decides to help Kirk. Now, just speaking of Sarek quickly, Sarek is such an amazing, long-serving character on Star Trek as Spock's dad, and I really disliked the guy who played him in this. I felt like it was not a bone towards the way Mark Lenard played the Vulcan Spock's father, Sarek, and I kind of wish there was a little bit more of an homage towards him.
Yeah, you know, at the end of the day, I don't think he had much to do, you know, just like with Winona Ryder, you know, we'd seen her die during the attack on Vulcan. She didn't get away. Spock was only managed to save his father. Then there was this whole thing just about how Spock had asked him, like, why he married an Earth woman, you know, human, why? And it comes around here at the end. He says, why did I marry her? It's because I loved her, of course, you know, and you're just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
it's kind of trying to weasel in this whole thing about Spock coming to terms with his humanity, like we'd seen before in the series and the movies. He needs to understand that he is both Vulcan and human, and come to terms with both of his.
That's what makes Spock so interesting.
Yeah, so they're trying to set up that here with the Sarek character, and it was just a bit,
It's a bit blah. Nothing really happened. So while the Enterprise hid itself within the gas clouds of Titan, Kirk and Spock actually beam aboard the Romulan ship, the Narada. Kirk fights with Nero and his offsider, that great actor that you mentioned, killing the latter and rescuing Pike, while Spock uses the elder Spock's ship to destroy the drill. Spock actually leads the Narada away from Earth and sets his ship to collide with Nero's ship. Enterprise actually arrives and beams Kirk, Pike and Spock aboard, but the older Spock's ship and the Narada collide, igniting the red matter. Kirk offers Nero help to escape, but Nero refuses, and he and the Narada are consumed in a black hole.
In a very cool sequence.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool sequence, and I did find it interesting, the idea that Kirk felt the need right at the 11th hour to kind of offer assistance to the Narada if they chose to accept it.
Yeah, and I just thought it was a good moment between Kirk and Spock, really. You know, it's like, he'd taken the position of captain by attacking Spock and his emotions, but at this point, it's kind of like, you know, he needs to be a captain at the end of the day. So he needs to uphold the morals of Starfleet. So, he's going to offer assistance. But then, you know, Spock sort of pulls him aside and says, do we really want to do that?
Yeah, that's right.
It's logical. He's like,
in this
instance,
this
time, I don't care.
That's right. So after the Narada and Nero are consumed by the black hole, we actually find ourselves back on Earth, and Kirk is actually promoted to the rank of captain and given command of the Enterprise, while Pike is actually promoted to Rear Admiral. Spock encounters his older self, having selected a planet for the surviving Vulcans to colonize. The older Spock persuades his younger self to continue serving in Starfleet, encouraging him to do what feels right instead of doing what is logical. Spock remains in Starfleet and becomes first officer under Kirk's command. The Enterprise goes to warp as the elder Spock speaks the "when no one has gone before" monologue in the voiceover right at the end that we're all familiar with. So yeah, it was interesting, and that's it, man. That after that, the film finishes.
Yeah, I'm not too sure I liked that Kirk was captain at the end. I don't think he'd even technically graduated Starfleet. They could have put him on as, continued to have Pike as captain and make Kirk first officer, and then, wait until the next movie to sort of build that up to it,
Yeah, I'm not convinced Kirk really earned his stripes all that much, if you know what I mean. Like, he clearly has the aptitude to be captain and to be a leader and to make tough decisions when no one else wants to make them. But I'm not convinced he earned the right to be the captain of a starship. And from the way I understand it, one of the flagship starships as well, yeah? It's kind of an interesting kind of story arc that I'm not too sure I totally bought.
But, that's Star Trek 2009. So... Recommend, not recommend?
You know what, man? I really dislike this film. I'm going to give this a not recommend. This for me is almost... It almost lives in the never happened pile. I really dislike it. This is the Terminator genesis of this thing. It's the Alien versus Predator. It's the movie that destroys a franchise and its mythology and its timeline and everything that makes it cool. It tries to do it again in a not so cool fashion. I really don't like this movie.
Warp rating?
Warp rating, I'm going to give it a warp 4.
I am very surprised. I really am.
Yeah, I only realised I disliked it so much after watching it again tonight. I haven't watched it for a few years. It's been a while, but I really suffered through it, and I kept pausing it and talking to my friend about everything that I hated.
No, well, as for me, I really like this movie. I really do. It is, it's very different to Star Trek. It's not your dad's Star Trek anymore. It is very different. They're going a new way with it. They're reinventing it. I like that he went out of his way to sort of say, this isn't really a prequel. This is a tangent timeline for Star Trek. So he's at least attempting to explain that, I'm not messing with the old Star Trek at all. This is just something new. And I like it. I like the new tone of it.
I don't mind the tone of it. I don't mind the way it looks I like all the production design. I like the fact that it's a big budget thing. Like there's clearly a lot of money on screen. I kind of think they got most of the casting right, but I really wish they made Kirk more sympathetic. I wish I liked him more.
I can agree with that. The Kirk character needed to be a bit more likable, I think.
Yeah, and to be fair, I do remember liking, and this is going to upset our friend Dewey Lindley, but I do remember liking Into Darkness more than this one.
Well, we'll find out next week. But, I'm going to give this like a warp 8.
Wow.
I enjoyed it. And like I said, it's very different to Star Trek, but, I like a good sci-fi, action-y kind of thing,
Nice.
They're changing it up.
They are changing up, it's very interesting.
Okay, so civilians log. We have like one tiny little thing, and it's not really feedback, but Dewey linked us to a video. Was it one of the like everything wrong with?
It's called they're called honest trailers.
Oh, it was an honest trailer.
It was an honest trailer, and they're so well put together. They're made with a lot of love, and they're hilarious. They're very funny, and they do all kinds of pop culture kind of films. I think they've done like Terminator 2 and every Avatar, and I think they did the Dark Knight Rises and the Transformers films, and they're very funny. So I really do recommend looking them up if you have a moment.
And of course, I'm pretty sure in that they do refer to this as like Lens Flare, the movie.
Yeah, that's right.
It's been a while since I watched that clip. I should have watched it before.
That's right.
But she did write, it's a visually stunning and quite entertaining movie, but very dumb and misses the whole point of Star Trek, which is true. I said they're going a different direction with it. I hate the googly eye alien that hangs around Scotty. I know, I kind of like that little guy. But I like the new updated look of the movie. It's a mindless, dumb, but fun movie, and that's about it. The worst thing about the movie is their take on Kirk. I didn't watch the original series, so my opinion is purely based on what I've seen in the new J.J. Abrams movies. He's not likable at all, and I find myself hoping he gets his ass kicked.
Nice.
And of course, very sad ending for Vulcan and Spock.
Yeah, I know.
One good thing about this movie is that it's still not as bad as Into Darkness.
Wow.
So I'm hoping she'll send, her feedback for Into Darkness. I'm very interested to see.
I'm sure she will. So
yes, what she actually does think of it.
Exactly.
Okay, so who said this?
Who said this? Now, bit of a hint. We talked about this early in the episode. So shall we just get straight into it?
Yeah, give me a countdown.
Okay, you ready? 3, 2, 1, scene.
The ex-wife took a whole damn planet in the divorce. All I've got left is my bones.
Wow, your accent there was fantastic. It was
probably
good.
One of my better ones.
It was very good. You did very well. So if you know who that is, jump on Twitter and use the hashtag Rewatch quote, and we will find you.
Okay, so next week's episode will be up to date with Star Trek movies, with Star Trek Into Darkness.
I know, it's our last one, isn't it?
Ooh. Can you believe it?
12 films later.
Whoa.
I know. I'll actually, truthfully, don't get me wrong, I've really enjoyed it and I've loved watching all the films again, but I'll be kind of happy to watch something different. Nice.
It's been a long few months.
Yeah, sorry, it's all right. That's it for this episode of the Rewatch Podcast. Keep up with listener interaction by joining our Facebook page at facebook.com/Rewatch Podcast. Follow the show on Twitter at Rewatch Pod and visit our webpage rewatchpodcast.podomatic.com.
And remember, you can always write us an email or record a voice message and send it to the rewatchpodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you've enjoyed the show, please consider giving us a rate and review on iTunes. Helps build up the listenership and that listener interaction that we love. Okay, well, thank you for joining me again, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks for joining me so late at night. In the middle of the week when we don't usually record.
Okay, well, time to get out of here. So I'll just say until next time, since my customary farewell would appear oddly self-serving, I shall simply say good luck.
And this is Nathan signing out, and I like this ship, It's exciting.
The Rewatch Podcast is not associated with the copyright holders of these films, and no copyright infringement is intended. The use of any and all copyrighted material is only for parody, news analysis, critique, or educational purposes as provided in Title 17, aka Fair Use. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. Copyright 2015, The Rewatch Podcast.